The dust of the road is not merely sand. It is the pulverized remnants of every empire that dared to stand against the heavens. The heat is a physical weight, but it is nothing compared to the fire burning behind Saul's eyes. He is the iron fist of the establishment, his reputation a shroud that chokes the hope out of anyone whispering of a new way. He is not just traveling, he is hunting. Every rhythmic thud of his horse's hooves against the sun-baked earth is a drumbeat of inevitable conquest. He carries the official warrants in his satchel, parchment that grants him the authority to erase, to dismantle, and to silence. He is so certain of his righteousness. He believes he is pruning a diseased branch to save the tree of state. He is the predator, and the road ahead is his killing ground. But then, the atmosphere shifts. The air itself seems to thicken, vibrating with a frequency that renders the world mute. It begins as a flicker, a light so absolute, so blindingly pure, that it eclipses the noon sun and tears through the fabric of reality. It is not a sunrise. It is a fracture in the firmament. Saul's horse rears, a wild, panicked screeching piercing the unnatural silence, and he is thrown into the blinding white void. In that heartbeat, the man who is everything, the scholar, the inquisitor, the heir to ancient tradition, is unmade. The world collapses into a singular, agonizing point of light, and when he struggles to stand, he reaches out into the darkness, his hands grasping at nothing but cold, empty air. He opens his eyes, but the world is gone. He is surrounded by the presence of something ancient, something limitless, and he is finally, terrifyingly, alone. The voice that speaks does not reach his ears. It resonates within his very marrow, carrying a question that will shatter everything he has ever known.
Why do you fight the inevitable?
The ink is still wet on the scroll, but the air in Galatia feels heavy, charged with the static of an impending storm. Paul, once the architect of the status quo, now finds himself in the crosshairs of a different kind of resistance. He sits in the shadows of a modest dwelling, his fingers tracing the coarse texture of the parchment. He is no longer hunting for the state. He is defending the soul of a movement that is being hollowed out from within. Reports reach him like shadows in the night, whispers of infiltrators who have crossed the borderlines. They carry not weapons of iron, but whispers of tradition and heavy chains of legalistic dogma. They are rewriting the message, turning the radical freedom he preached into a rigid cage of compliance. Paul's inner world is a tempest. He feels the betrayal deep in his bones, a sharp, cold ache that transcends physical exhaustion. His mission is unraveling, and his authority is being dismantled by men who speak with the tongue of logic but possess the heart of a prison guard. He begins to write, his hand trembling with a mix of righteous indignation and agonizing concern. This is not a polite debate. It is an act of war against the compromise of a vision. He feels the weight of every soul he has guided, now vulnerable to being led astray back into the darkness. His rhetoric burns with a desperate intensity, a shield forged from his own transformation. Suddenly, a heavy thud echoes against the outer door. The messenger, breathless and pale, stumbles into the room. He carries no message from the friends Paul expected. Instead, he holds a seal, the unmistakable, jagged insignia of an imperial investigator. The ink on the table smears as Paul rises. Outside, the rhythmic march of iron-shod boots synchronizes with the frantic beating of his heart. The trap has been set, and the walls are beginning to close in. The harbor of Thessalonica is a maze of shifting shadows and damp, salt-crusted stone. Here, the weight of the empire is not a distant concept. It is an omnipresent gaze. Paul, now an outcast from his own former life, navigates these claustrophobic alleyways like a ghost. He is building a sanctuary, but it is a house of glass, transparent to the eyes of those who fear the radical truth he carries. Every word he utters in the clandestine gatherings is a gamble. He watches the faces of his followers, fear etched into their features like erosion on a cliffside. They are living in the lion's den, their faith a flickering candle against the vast, howling darkness of imperial dominance. Paul feels the suffocating pressure of his own responsibility. He knows that his presence brings danger, a magnetic pull that attracts the unwanted attention of the authorities. He is a shepherd leading his flock through a landscape of razors, and the psychological burden is absolute. He spends his nights listening to the distant, rhythmic patrols, his mind mapping out the vulnerabilities of his small group. He writes to them, his words serving as a beacon of endurance. He tells them to stand tall, to see beyond the immediate horizon, and to anticipate a dawn that will undo the current order. Yet, even as he writes, the air in the city begins to sour. A sudden, jarring silence descends upon the port, a silence far more terrifying than the noise of the marketplace. Paul approaches the window, peering out into the narrow street. Below, the torches of a local militia flicker, reflecting off the polished armor of soldiers who have finally found the scent. They are not merely patrolling. They are systematically tightening the net. A heavy, rhythmic knocking erupts at the main entrance, splintering the silence, as the door begins to groan under the force of those who have come to extinguish the light. Corinth is a shimmering mirage of opulence and decay, a city where the scent of expensive incense struggles against the stagnant rot of moral insolvency. It is a place where everything is for sale, including truth. Paul stands at the periphery, observing the sprawling metropolis with a heavy, analytical gaze. The community he helped forge here is not facing an external enemy. It is dissolving from within, succumbing to the intoxicating pull of the city's decadence. Internal fractures mirror the architectural chaos of the streets. Vain ambition, fractured loyalties, and a disregard for the sacred have turned the fellowship into a mirror of the very society they were meant to transcend. Paul feels the stinging betrayal not of the state, but of his own kin. The psychological toll is immense. He sees his life's work being repurposed to serve the whims of the proud. He is forced to confront the harsh reality that a movement's greatest threat is not the dungeon, but the infiltration of pride. He picks up his quill, his movements precise and cold. This is no longer a pastoral letter. It is a surgical strike intended to excise the rot. He writes with a sharpness that cuts through the vanity, exposing the fragile foundations of their arrogance. He is unsparing, demanding a radical alignment of their hearts. Just as the ink dries, a commotion erupts in the courtyard below. The rhythmic, opulent celebration of the city suddenly stops, replaced by the hushed whispers of panic. A messenger, disheveled and frantic, pushes past the guards. He carries no seal of Rome, but the news he brings is far more personal and devastating. He stares at Paul, his eyes wide with a warning that stops the breath in Paul's lungs.
The secret assembly has been discovered, and the doors are already being barred from the outside.
The fire and brimstone of his previous warnings have left Paul exhausted, the adrenaline of command replaced by a hollow, aching silence. He sits in the dim, claustrophobic quarters of a safe house, the weight of the Corinthian divide pressing down on him. The veneer of the unshakable leader begins to peel away, revealing the jagged edges of a man who is profoundly wounded. He is not just an architect of a movement. He is a vessel bearing the scars of an unrelenting pursuit. In the solitude, the thorn in the flesh, a term he carries like a secret weight, becomes a mirror reflecting his own profound limitations. He realizes that his strength was never his own, but a fragile bridge built over his own deepest insecurities and past traumas. For the first time, he drops the mantle of the invincible strategist. He writes with a raw, terrifying vulnerability that threatens to collapse the very structure of authority he has labored to build. He speaks of weakness as his strength, an admission that feels like heresy to the world of imperial power. He is human, fragmented, and desperate for a coherence that the world refuses to grant. The air in the room turns unnaturally cold. The shadows, once his allies in hiding, seem to lengthen, taking on a life of their own. A soft, rhythmic tapping begins, not at the door, but from the hidden panels in the wall. Paul freezes, his heart hammering against his ribs. The parchment is snatched from his desk by an unseen hand through a fissure in the stone. A low, distorted voice emanates from the walls themselves, reciting his own words back to him with a mocking, haunting clarity. He is no longer the hunter or the teacher. He is the prey, and the space he occupies has become a trap of his own making. The final ink has dried, the quill is set aside, and the scrolls are scattered like autumn leaves in the wind of an encroaching empire. Paul, the architect of shadows, stands at the threshold of the Roman citadel. The heart of the beast he spent a lifetime challenging. He knows his journey does not end in victory as the world defines it, but in an enduring transformation. The chains that once defined his captivity have now become the conduits for a message that would outlive the marble columns of Caesar and the stone walls of his prison. He realized long ago that the true revolution was never about toppling a regime with swords or seizing power through force. It was about an internal horizon, a fundamental shift in the human spirit that makes empires irrelevant. As he gazes upon the sprawling, restless capital, he understands that his letters were never meant to be mere artifacts of history. They were seeds of a radical justice planted in the soil of a dying age. His life concludes not with a final silence, but with an echo that refuses to fade. He stands as a testament to the idea that a single voice, sharpened by conviction and tempered by profound vulnerability, can rewrite the moral fabric of a civilization. The shadows that once hunted him have finally receded, leaving behind only the light of a legacy that continues to challenge the structures of our own world. History is not merely a record of the conquerors. It is the archive of those who dared to imagine a reality beyond the reach of iron and fire. As the dust of antiquity settles, we are left with this final, haunting truth. Empires are ephemeral, and stone will inevitably crumble. But the ideas we entrust to the winds of history are the only things that truly stand the test of time. Paul is gone, but the echo of his defiance remains. An invitation for every generation to question the darkness and carry the torch of their own radical conviction.